Let's turn to 2 Samuel, 13th chapter, trouble in David's family. When one family member messes up, I guess he and she doesn't realize how it affects the whole family. And sometimes even outside the family, in the community. We're going to see today again, trouble in David's family and where it originated from. Our first point is David's oldest son would have reigned once David died. That was the way it's supposed to be. And he's the one that's involved in great sin and turmoil. We have 5 things here to look at. Number 1, this son possessed unlawful lust for his half-sister. Let's go ahead and read verse 1 and 2. And it came to pass after this that Absalom, now he's the 3rd son of David, and her name was Maacha, the son of David, had a fair sister. Fair means beautiful, whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Loved here in Hebrew is something that means, it's spelled A-H-A-B, but listen to what it means. To have affection or appetite for another person sexually. He was completely consumed with lust for his sister. Verse 2, and Amnon was so vexed. Vexed means feeling tied up. He was in knots. He was just completely out of control. They fell sick for his half-sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. And Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her, or difficult to do what he wanted to do. So these first 2 verses in the Word of God, I guess by many people would be skipped over when it comes to teaching or preaching or sharing what happened here in these 2 verses. What a horrible 2 verses we have just read. But these 2 verses didn't stop in the history of the Old Testament. These things are still going on today in our lives and community. Possess unlawful lust for his half-sister. We may think, how in the world can this happen? How can anybody be in that low and have that much lust for his half-sister? You and I probably cannot comprehend that, but there's no limits to what the devil can do to one's life and one's heart. So let's go ahead and see the next part for a moment. Jonadab is an example of the wisdom of the world because he came and offered advice. And sometimes the advice that we get from the world is not God's advice. Let's look what he advised Amnon to do in verse 3. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab. And he is Ammon's cousin, matter of fact, the son of Shimei, David's brother. So he's in the family. And Jonadab was a very subtle, that word means cunning and crafty man. And he said to Amnon, why art thou, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Because he's not eating, he's consumed with lust. Will thou not tell me? And Amnon said unto him, I love Tamar, my brother's Absalom's sister. And Jonadab said unto him, lay thee down on thy bed, make thyself sick, or go ahead and fake it. And when thy brother cometh to see thee, say unto him, I pray thee, let my sister Tamar come and give me meat, and dress the meat in my sight, that I may see her and eat it in her hand. So he said, I got a plan for you. Go ahead and act like you're sick, and then send for her, that she'll bring you a meal to where you are, and that way you might can carry out what you want to carry out. So the advice again from a godly person would be, hey, you're going to have to run from this. You're going to have to run. You're going to have to flee fornication. You're going to have to go to God. That'd be spiritual advice. But he gets worldly advice. Again, we have to be very careful when somebody outside of God's will tells us what they think we should do. We need to weigh it out. Because advice comes all the time, don't it? Yeah. We get advice all the time. If I was you, this is what I would do. This is what I would do. This is what I would do. We have to be careful. Sometimes it's good advice too. But I think the bottom line is pray about it ourselves and ask God what we should do. Now, if he had stopped right then and prayed about it, God would have said, you don't do this. But he didn't. He gets advice from his cousin about what he should do, the plan he should make to carry out what he wanted to do. So, number 3, a plan was given without hesitation, and Amon followed it without hesitation. Not one drop of hesitation. Verse 6, so Amon lay down, made himself sick, and when the king was come to see him, Amon said unto the king, I pray thee, already the word means I ask thee, I plead with thee, let Tamar my sister come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat at her hand. So it sounds innocent here, what he's asking for as a family member, and this is what family people do. Provide a meal for the one that's sick. So it sounds like everything is going to be okay, but he, without hesitation, he does exactly what his cousin said to do. Number 4, Tamar found herself in a troubling situation. She immediately thought of Scripture. Let's begin in verse 7. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, Go now to thy brother Amon's house and dress him meat. And Tamar went to her brother Amon's house. He was laid down, and she took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and then baked the cakes. And she took a pan and poured them out up before him, but he refused to eat. And Amon said, Have out all men from me. In other words, let all the men get away. And they went out every man from him. And Amon said unto Tamar, Bring the meat into the chamber, that I may eat of thine hand. I want you to feed me. And Tamar took the cakes which he had made and brought them to the chamber to Amon thy brother. And when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her and said unto her, Come lie with me, my sister. So he grabbed her. And she answered him, Nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly. Now, folly means here to act in a disgraceful manner. Do not act in a disgraceful manner. So, back in verse 11, when he asked, Come lie with me, my sister, Brother Benny, would you read the law that God gave about this, please?
It says, None of you shall approach to any that is near kin to him, to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. And verse 9 says, The nakedness of thy sister, the daughter of thy father, or daughter of thy mother, whether she be born at home or born abroad, even their nakedness thou shalt not uncover.
So how plain is it? That's the law that God gave. But see, in the New Testament, I think it's in John, it says sin is the transgression of the law. That's what sin is. So what's the word transgression? It's violation. It's like running a stop sign, violating the law. So sin that we all commit, it's not just the 10 Commandments, and we break any scripture. It's violating the law of God, the Word of God. And we all have that problem every day. But it's spelled out here under law without any confusion that he should not do what he has done. And the sister knew that. She knew what the law said. And she tells him, again, the word is folly. You're trying to act in a disgusting manner. I don't want any part of it. But he grabbed his sister. He's stronger than she was. It's not her fault. It's his fault what's going on. Look at number 5. If Amon was so desperate, then he needed to ask King David for Tamar's hand in marriage. Now, this was not the way it's supposed to be. But let's see what it says in verse 13 about that. And I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? As for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. If you do this, you'll be a fool. Now therefore I pray thee, I ask thee, I plead with thee, speaking to the king, or to our father, for he will not withhold me from thee. In other words, ask him about us getting married. And he's going to say no. See, but she wanted him to stop what he was doing and trying to just get him to back off and just go, but the law of Moses forbade this type of marriage. That's why she done this. She's not really wanting to marry her half brother. She's trying to get him. Go ask Daddy about this. Ask him, should we get married? And she knew what he was going to say. So she had some wisdom right here, but it didn't hold back the temptation and the sickness and the lust that he had for his half sister. So let's stop there for a few moments now, if you would, and we might have some discussion or questions or some comments about the first part. Does anybody have something you want to say about the first part? Can you believe what we're reading here today? Mm-hmm. And it's.
I think back at that time, the Hebrew women, that was an honor to them to be a virgin. And they wore special clothes that
She had on a coat that represented a virgin.
Represent that, yes. And then her brother would.
But a man like that is so full of lust. Why don't he go somewhere down the street instead of his half sister? You know, how sick can a person be? Like these people that can molest these children. I'm not condoning it. Want to get a woman down the street?
Exactly.
You know, but it's the sickness they got. It's not because they can't get somebody down the street. This is the sickness they got for what's going on in their life. He is completely consuming his sister. Now, why did he want the meal made in his presence? He wanted to look at her.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to see her cook a meal. He is so possessed with his half sister, it's almost like we shouldn't even read this. But it's the Word of God. And it's happening today in our own community.
It's a lot worse.
There's many families today we don't even know about who went through this with their family members. A lot of people's gone through this.
You know, you wonder why David, don't you think he should have been a little suspicious? I mean, wouldn't he, as a rule, think that his servants, if he was hungry, his servants would fix food and feed it to him?
We'll see in a little while that David did not really stay on top of this,
No,
but David done the same thing.
Yeah, he did.
If nothing else, the second part, Ammon was truly worth nothing, absolutely nothing. Number one, he despised Tamar and wanted nothing to do with her. And once it's all finished, look what happened in verse 14. Howbeit, he would not hearken or listen to her voice about saying about Daddy's permission to get married, but being stronger than she, forced her. See how strong he was? He forced her and lay with her. And Ammon hated her exceedingly once it's all done now. So that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. See, now the hate is stronger than his lust. He wants her out of his sight now.
Yep.
And Ammon said unto her, arise, be gone. I can't stand you no more. And once the flesh has done what the flesh wants to do, the flesh now wants any part of this thing. But it'd come back. It'd come back to him in a few days. You know, the same thing would come back if he's not living from it. But right now, it happens also today with people having, call it affairs, it's adultery or fornication. When that time is over, a lot of time they don't want nothing to do with them. They can't. They despise them, like it was their fault, or sometimes it is both people's fault. I'm not saying it's not, but they don't want anything to do with it or the party.
Yeah, it sounds to me like he's trying to blame her. And
Well,
he's the instigator of all of it.
And most everybody does blame somebody, don't
Yeah,
they? You know,
I think probably it says guilt.
guilt. If you get out of here, if I don't see you,
Yeah, if you're out of sight and
Yeah.
out of mind, and the guilt will ease.
Yeah.
Reduced anyway.
yeah. So the second part, Tamar was not guilty of no sin, but she was certainly affected by it. Go to verse 16. And she said unto him, there is no cause. That's what she said. This evil is in sending me away is greater than the other that thou didst unto me. But he would not hearken or listen to her. Then he called his servant that ministered to him and said, put now this woman out from me. He called her woman now, and bolt the door after her. And she had a garment of divers or various kinds of colors upon her, for with such rose were the king's daughters. Listen, they were virgins of apparel. That was her clothing. So she wore a virgin's apparel. Then his servant brought her out and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head. That's a sign of mourning. and rent or tore her garment of divers colors. See, she is so sad about this, she tore the very garment that represented virginity, and laid her hand on her head, and went on crying. And you think she ever got over this? No. Until the day she died, she never got over it. Never got over it. So, she did not do anything wrong, but she's affected by it. And everyone today in the world that's gone through something like this, you're not bothering us, Beverly.
Oh, it's gonna be dry for a minute. I'll be
Okay.
right back.
Good to see you back. Even though they have received God's forgiveness, all that's clear in the heart, it's still there. If you think about it, it's still there. And that's a sad part about it.
No, Brother Dean, I think, not just in that situation, but in marriages, I think sometimes men have the ability to make the woman feel guilty.
Yes, sir.
They do that because
That
they
goes
tell them
both
all
ways.
this stuff, and before you know it, the woman's blaming herself,
That's right. I had a couple years ago, you won't know them, you don't know, you have no idea, but a long time ago. And she was guilty of adultery, but he wanted to keep the marriage intact, so I went to see him. We met several times, and I said, you want to keep her. I mean, you don't want, I want to lose my wife. I said, okay then. Now you come in one afternoon and she hadn't got supper cooked, don't bring this back up. Don't use this as an excuse to get on to her. If you're gonna take her back, and I admire you for doing this, but don't bring this up when you get mad at her. It won't work. You gotta forget it and forgive her and go on. But it didn't. They finally got a divorce. But it's a hard situation on both parties. But again, what you said is so true. If they sometimes handle it such a way that the person is really innocent feels guilty about it. People have a strange way of turning things around, don't they?
Yeah.
Making you feel like, and a lot of times, ladies that are raped, even the law convinced them, well, it might have been, you might have asked for it.
Yeah.
It don't matter who asked for it, it's still wrong. It's still wrong, So, anything else on number 2 you want to bring out for a moment? Number 3 then, part of Absalom's reaction was honorable. So let's see what part that was in verse 20. Let's read about that part. And Absalom, her brother, said unto her, hath Ammon, thy brother, been with thee? But hold now thy peace, my sister. He is thy brother. Regard not this thing. That's easy to say, isn't it? So Tamar remained desolate. The word means emotional devastation in her brother Absalom's house. Verse 21. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very wroth. He was angry, and he was upset when David heard about this. So, verse 22. And Absalom spake unto his brother Ammon, neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Ammon, because he had forced his sister Tamar. So now you got another brother hating his brother. You already got a brother that forced his sister. Now you got another brother that hates his brother. It's verse 23. And it came to pass after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep shears in Baal Hazor, which is beside Ephraim, and Absalom invited all the king's sons. Now he got a plan here too. What he does, he invites all the king's sons because he don't want King David to know what's going on. If I invite everybody, he wants to kill the brother. If I invite everybody to come, he won't think his plan. If I just invite Ammon, then he might figure out what I want to do. But he invited King David first, hoping he'd turn it down, and King David did turn it down. So now the plan is set in motion. If I can get all the other brothers to come and get this man, my brother, killed, then they won't figure out the plan I had. Let's go and look at this a little bit deeper right here. Now, when it comes to Absalom, later on he names his own daughter after Tamar. Down the road one day he has a daughter. He names her Tamar. That's how much he hated what happened to Tamar, his sister. Now, I have on your paper, David may have done nothing because his own precious sin with Bathsheba and Uriah. That could have been the reason he backed off. Didn't say much about it. Even though he was forgiven, and Nathan told him, you are forgiven. You're not going to die. Now, the baby died, but now in his mind, he knows what I've done. I know down in Eastland, the situation, the daddy was living with a woman for several years and did not get a divorce. As a matter of fact, when he got wore out and sick, he came home, his wife took him back in. Then his daughter started living with a man. So the daddy asked her about what she was doing. She said, now I know this for a fact. She said, well, you done it, I'm going to do it too. Now, what can you say? Mm-hmm. What you going to do to me? I'm doing the same thing you done. So right here, David knew, hey, he done the same thing I done. I didn't get my sister, but I got one of my soldiers' wives. So he didn't have much. That's when Daddy never whipped me for smoking. I smoked. I got caught smoking as a young boy behind the barn. He did not whip me for smoking because he smoked. He said, I'm going to whip you for smoking. I wish you wouldn't do it because it's going to ruin your health and you'll have an appetite for it. I wish you wouldn't do it, but I'm not going to whip you for this. If you drink, I'm gonna break your leg. But I don't drink. But I do smoke. So it's been a hypocrite for him to beat me half to death for smoking, and he's smoking at the same time. But you got parents today who have beer in the refrigerator who get mad at children for drinking alcohol. Same thing.
So the old saying, the apple don't fall far from the tree.
Mm-mm.
I mean, look at Adam and Eve's sons, Seth and just went right out of my head.
But the whole family's in disarray. Look at the fourth and last part. After 2 long and silent years, Absalom got revenge. Verse 23, let's read about that. And it came to pass after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep. I just read that, didn't I? Verse 24. How far did I read down? Oh, go to verse 24. And Absalom came to the king and said, behold now, thy servant hath sheep shears. Let the king, I beseech thee, and his servants go with thy servant. And the king said to Absalom, nay, my son. And that's what Absalom wanted to hear. He didn't want him there, but he wanted to invite him. Now let us not all go, lest or perhaps we be chargeable unto thee. And he pressed him, howbeit he would not go, but blessed him. Then said Absalom, if not, I pray thee, I ask thee, I plead with thee, my brother, Amon go with us. He wanted to make sure he went. And the king said unto him, why should he go with thee? But Absalom pressed him that he let Amon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, mark ye now, when Amon's heart is merry with wine. Now see, David said the same thing to his soldier. Oh, was it Joab? He said, now you get to a certain place of war, make sure he's in the front line. Remember the story? Make sure he's on the front line. Here the same thing being said by the son now. Mark you now, when Amon's heart is merry, when his wine, and when I say unto you, smite Amon, then kill him. Fear not. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So now he had authority over his soldiers too. All his sons had soldiers too, and they all had authority. And in verse 29, and the servants of Absalom did unto Amon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, every man got him up to his mule and fled. So the plan is carried out, and the brother is now dead. And we'll see more about Absalom and his absence from David in our next week's Sunday school lesson. Don't forget now, next Sunday is 9:45. So I want to go back, would you please, 2 Samuel 12. And one verse, and we'll close. That's verse 10. 2 Samuel 12, verse 10. Let's go back and see what started all this. And David's told these words. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me, hast taken my wife of Uriah, hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife, and the sword will never leave your house. Not just a man of war. We have seen today the sword never left his house, which is the vision. Death, harm, sickness, turmoil that originated from a sin in David's life that was forgiven by God. Forgiven. But the backlash of it goes on and on and on. Forgiving sin is pretty easy. If we have a broken heart, you confess it, God says it's a done deal. But look at the other things in one's life that goes on for years and years and years. Any more? I'm sorry.
No, sin begets sin. And it surely did with that family, didn't it?
It sure did.
What does David mean when he says, "Least we be chargeable unto thee"? In
What?
verse 25.
Verse 25, okay? It's like it's saying in 13. Verse 25. And the king said to Absalom, "Nay, my son, let us not all go, lest we be chargeable unto thee." I don't know. What's the word chargeable? Anybody got about your notes what chargeable means?
Is it 13 or 12?
25. Verse 25. Chapter 13.
13:25.
And the king said to Absalom, it's David talking to him, "Nay, my son, let us not all go, lest we be chargeable unto thee." And he pressed him, howbeit he would not go, but blessed him. Chargeable. The key word is chargeable. Can anybody look up in your notes? I don't have a way to look at my Bible to find it.
All it says is that David would not go himself. He was not going to that get together.
Gathering, yeah.
Yes.
Unless it all points back to David.
Lest we be we could find out the word chargeable, we'd understand it better. And I got some Bibles that break it down. This one does not. But after a while,
Burden.
burden, lest we be burdened unto thee. Okay, maybe he said if we all went, if everybody went, you're going to have a burden that we all show up. Maybe that's what he meant. If everybody you invite sometime does show up, you have a burden, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. Thank God some of them don't show up, you know.
They knew what was gonna happen,
Yeah,
and they went. They may be charged.
that's right. That's a good thought too. That'd be a burden too, wouldn't it?
Maybe they're all guilty,
Uh-huh.
but
Don't all go, but they'll all be charged.
Charged. Mm-hmm. We all be in the same boat if we all show up.
Brother, they forgive, if Absalom had forgiven his brother, it would have stopped it right here. That's what unforgiveness does, even in our life today.
He made it worse, didn't he?
He made it worse, because he didn't forgive his brother. And what does the Bible speak about unforgiveness? We don't give others their trespasses, he won't forgive us ours. It would have stopped right there.
He could have went to him and led him back to the Lord in fellowship. He could have done a spiritual work in his brother's life.
And that didn't make it right what he did,
But he could have helped him.
but he could have stopped it right there. Maybe even could have, talked to his sister.
Yeah. He could have been a mediator somehow. Instead, he hated him so bad he planned to kill him. And it went on and on and on and on.
Forgive 70 times 7.
That's what Jesus said, didn't he?